Fairness and equity should be accorded to all minorities, white or black, and South Africa can do better with its land reform policies in this regard. Whatever it does, the South African President Ramaphosa does not want to be seen as bowing to Donald Trump, and it still needs to re-engage constructively with white Afrikaners. Hello, welcome to this special edition of Global Business Insights, where we look closer at headlines, moving markets, and offer perspectives on the business environment. LVMH CEO and Chairman Bernard Arnault said yesterday that the European Union must soften its stance towards Trump's trade demands and agree a deal to avoid tariffs and protect European jobs. He added that talks call for reciprocal concessions and that so far he's under the impression talks are not going well. In the US on data, investors await the preliminary S&P Global Purchasing Managers Index, that's PMI data for May, which will be released later today. The PMI data is expected to show that the overall business activity expanded at a steady pace. German leader Merz has confirmed a meeting with US President Trump and hinted at a proposal to remove tariffs on both sides. The Pentagon has also formally accepted a $400 million luxury jumbo jet gifted by Qatar that will be used as the US president's plane despite bipartisan concerns about ethics and security. Donald Trump wants the aircraft, which will need to be modified, to be used as Air Force One, while Boeing completes two new jets that have been long delayed. Qatar's Prime Minister has denied that the $400 million jumbo jet gift to Trump was an attempt to buy influence, saying the US has historically accepted gifts from many nations. OpenAI is paying $6.4 billion to acquire former Apple design chief Sir John Ives' hardware startup IO in a bet on alternatives to the smartphone as the dominant device to access AI. OpenAI paid $5 billion for full ownership of IO in an all-equity deal in which 55 employees working at IO will join OpenAI. HSBC has told its UK retail bank staff that their bonuses could be reduced if they fail to come to the office often enough. Line managers would start monitoring office attendance more closely, and adherence to its policy could form part of their annual performance review. Marks & Spencer says online services will continue to be disrupted until July after last month's cyber attack. The cyber attack could also hit this year's profits by around £300 million, more than analysts had expected. Bitcoin hit a record high yesterday as growing industry optimism that the US will shortly agree its first regulations for digital assets spurred fresh enthusiasm. The price of the token rose to as much as $109,760, surpassing the previous high of $109,000 set in January and extending its rally of the past month. The Central Bank of Nigeria has issued a draft framework aimed at overhauling anti-money laundering practices across the country's financial sector. The Apex Bank stated that the initiative is also a response to the increasing digitalization of Nigeria's financial system and the growing complexity of financial transactions. Banks and other financial institutions have been given 12 months from the final issuance of the standards to comply with the new standards, which are intended to promote efficiency and ensure full regulatory compliance with local guidelines and international frameworks. Stakeholder feedback is also being sought to enrich the document, and comments are to be submitted by June 13, 2025. On Wall Street, stocks sold off with a high spike in Treasury yields as traders grew concerned that a new US budget bill would lead to a larger deficit and fiscal challenges. Oil futures were also lower for a second straight session after an earlier rally on a report that Israel may be preparing to attack Iran's nuclear facilities fizzled out. The focus was on fundamentals as the Energy Information Administration in the US reported a second straight weekly build in US crude oil inventories and increases in gasoline and diesel stocks. My deep dive is on the rift between South Africa and the US. Yesterday, in talks led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the South Africa's delegation presented a united front during a heated exchange with US President Trump, in which Trump repeatedly ambushed the South Africans with claims of white genocide in the country. Trump played a video as evidence of white farmer killings featuring EFF leader Julius Malema chanting, "Kill the farmer, kill the Boer." The genocide allegations have been central to an executive order issued by Trump in February cutting funding to South Africa and offering Afrikaners refuge status in the US. Minister of Agriculture John Steenhuisen and others in the delegation assured Trump that despite high crime levels in South Africa, it affects all races, and South Africa still values the US as a key trade and diplomatic partner. Steenhuisen referenced the formation of the Government of National Unity as a pushback against Malema's chants. On concerns that Trump might not attend the G20 Leaders Summit scheduled to be held in Johannesburg in November, Ramaphosa said the US started the G20 and it was important that it continues to play a key role. Trump did not commit to attending the summit, where South Africa is due to hand over the presidency of the multilateral body to the US. The United States is South Africa's second biggest bilateral trading partner after China. South Africa faces a 30% tariff under Trump's currently suspended Liberation Day tariff regime. Presenting EFF leader Malema as a fringe political figure and not representative of mainstream South African politics, and that South Africa was keen to discuss a trade deal and business opportunities may have helped to calm some tensions. Also in the meeting, South Africa business tycoon Johan Rupert, who was part of Ramaphosa's delegation, stepped in to back up Ramaphosa, and he also told Elon Musk, that's Trump's South Africa-born billionaire ally, who was present in the Oval Office at the discussion, that his Starlink telecom system were needed in every South African police station to combat crime. Trump will not be won over so easily, and there are problems that obviously need time to allow the heat to cool down. This may just be one of them. Indeed, further attempts by Ramaphosa to placate Trump could lead to political difficulties back home. The geopolitics in post-apartheid South Africa are very complex and unique to a peculiar historical background. China historically played the winning card by supporting local blacks at the right time, and they are being favored for it. There is talk of an upcoming Africa-US summit, which the US hopes will lead to a more beneficial reset of trade relations in a mutual way in a continent seen as the next major frontier for economic growth. It is unwise, and Trump must see that, for the US to ignore Africa or to cultivate it as an enemy waiting to be harvested as an ally by China. We also look at Amazon's annual meeting, where investors rejected all outside shareholder resolutions, including 3 meant to address the online retail giant's impact on climate change. Voters, however, approved the re-election of 12 directors and proposed executive compensation. Shareholders put forward 8 proposals, all of which Amazon encouraged investors to vote against. This year, rejected proposals included one that would have required additional reporting on Amazon's overall carbon emissions, another targeting the climate impact of data centers, and one calling for further disclosure about packaging materials, particularly plastic. All were not endorsed by investors. Amazon said its existing disclosures are sufficient and that it is working towards reducing its environmental impact. One proposal would have had Amazon assess its board structure to consider how it might develop AI more responsibly, while the other would have required a report on data usage and collection around AI. Investors rejected also another shareholder's proposal where it was suggested that Amazon create a policy ensuring the separation of its CEO and board chair roles. The company already separates the two roles between CEO Andy Jassy and founder Jeff Bezos, but not as a mandatory policy. As CEO until 2021, Bezos had also held the chairmanship. Last year, there were 14 resolutions and all failed to get sufficient votes to be enacted. France's private sector economy remained in contraction during May, extending the current downturn to 9 months. The Flash France Composite PMI output index recorded 48.0 in May, marking a 9th successive monthly reading showing a contraction. The service sector remained the driving force behind this weakness, more than offsetting an accelerated increase in manufacturing output. The Hamburg Commercial Bank Flash Germany Composite PMI Output Index registered also at 48.6 in May, also in contraction, down from 50.1 in April. This signaled a modest reduction in private sector business activity, was also the first contraction so far this year. The weak performance also due to contracting service sector business activity, which amid a sustained weakening of demand fell for the second month running with index at 47.2. Manufacturing production, on the other hand, rose for the third straight month. The Flash Eurozone Composite PMI Output Index dropped to 49.5 in May from 50.4 in April, a marginal contraction for the first time in 5 months, and also signaling a reduction in private sector output midway through the second quarter of the year. The renewed decrease in overall business activity reflected a modest reduction in services activity, which fell for the first time since last November and at the fastest pace in 16 months. In contrast, manufacturing production continued to rise in May. And in the UK, services PMI recovered to 50.2, beating expectations, while manufacturing in the UK dropped to 45.1, dragging the composite index to a marginal contraction at 49.4. Business expectations also showed some recovery, while weak new order intakes continued to weigh on output. We will get US PMIs later in the day as we see Europe and the UK struggling to expand in May. In Asia-Pacific markets, indexes fell, tracking declines on Wall Street as investor sentiment soured on fears that a new US budget could substantially add to the country's debt. US futures are, however, tilting higher ahead of open. Indeed, markets are trading cautiously as they continue to be concerned with the US deficit that may have fueled the previous session's sell-off. The spotlight is now on the budget bill, which could go to a pre-dawn House vote after last-minute revisions late yesterday to win over still unconvinced Republicans. Bitcoin continues to rise, hitting another high of $111,678, driven by optimism that the government will soon pass favorable regulation. Well, that's it on this special edition of Global Business Insights. Thanks for watching. This is Bode Oshosami. Bye-bye.